Welcome back to the Workplace Theater Podcast. We're here live today at the Broadview Public Library. Our special guest today is Mayor Katrina Thompson. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
And as always, we have Mr. Joseph Natal with Grow Exponential and Michelle Padula with SBE Consulting.
Thank you.
Yes. So first, congratulations for being reelected. Were you nervous at all?
No, and thank you.
Okay, good. Why not? Why were you not nervous? Everyone would seem to be nervous and leading up, especially the last 2 weeks to voting.
It was more exhausting than being nervous. You know, I still had government to run, and it's no days off, so it's just part of the process.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's set the stage for today's conversation. The topic is mental health, emotional intelligence, and leading with care. Okay, we've been exploring what helps communities truly thrive, which led us to kind of a deeper curiosity. So we've gotten leaders together to get their perspective. So it's how do leadership, mental health, and emotional awareness work together to help people feel included, supported, and ready to grow, okay? In our conversation today, we'll talk about what that looks like in real life, from everyday struggles to moments of care. So let's start with a warm-up and break the ice a little bit. What's one thing you've learned about leading that you wish you knew when you were younger?
Wow, what an interesting icebreaker. So I would say, you know, back when I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, we didn't talk about mental health or emotional intelligence or emotional awareness. We didn't talk about those things. But if I had to reflect back on my childhood during that time and the position that I serve in today, I wish it was more talked about so people as community would not be shamed because of whatever they lack of with mental health or emotional part of self-care. Yeah, I think that would be like something I would really own into if I knew back then how we can make it better. I think we'll be a healthier nation today if we had some more tools in our toolkit to prepare us for today.
Okay. What about you, Joseph? What are you thinking? If you knew what you know today back then, what's something that you would be thinking about?
Well, I'd definitely be thinking about how much stress I put on myself, right? Not just everyone else's expectations, but my own expectations, and what I would do to find peace, right? So like peace of mind, just peace of like peace and quiet, all those things, incorporating those into my day-to-day, because they were, especially really young in my career, it was few and far between. Like, I was the guy that 70 hours a week was a light week. You know, it's like I had time for friends and family if I only worked 70 hours that week. And so that's something I wish I had a mentor that would have been like, dude, just settle down, relax, like find your balance, find your peace, because you're going to burn out. You're gonna hit a wall here where you can't sustain this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would have been mine.
I like the peace.
Yeah. Michelle, something as a leader or leading people today that you wish you would have known when you were younger?
Well, I think playing on, what you both said, it's like, closing that stress loop, right? Or you burn the candle at both ends, or you just go, and not having the knowledge because it wasn't talked about. Like, we never talked about mental health or, emotional intelligence or emotional awareness. I mean, nothing like that. And I think, also is like, having that arsenal of tools on how do you self-regulate yourself back from a stressful situation. Even as a kid, if it was like, oh my God, I can't imagine what youth go through today with, everything, not just dealing with your peers in school, but on social media as well. And like, some of the traumatic social experiences they have. And it's like having those toolkits to, self-regulate or, just being aware of your own emotions or other people's behaviors and how to navigate through that so that yeah, I probably wouldn't have been as stressed as a kid, knowing if I knew then what I know now about, emotional regulation, being emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent.
I think I feel a combination of everything that you guys are saying. I guess I would say, however you feel is okay.
Yes.
Right? However you feel is okay. Because I think as a young person, you need to be simple and to be able to understand, right? Be communicated with where you can understand. I think is that however you feel is okay. That's what I would say.
It's interesting, Michelle. You brought up a dynamic that we didn't have to deal with as kids, and that is social media. Like so, even more so today, all this stuff becomes public, right? Like,
Yeah.
you just screw something up, and it's on film, and 4 or 5 people post it, right? It's so
It's not just in the cafeteria,
No, it's not.
in the lunch line. Now it's,
like praying nobody remembers tomorrow,
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let alone a year from now or 5 years from now,
Yep.
or they remind you at your 20-year reunion,
Yeah.
Were you the one that did? Yeah,
Yeah.
it was me.
Yeah, it's not limited to just the people that were there. It's like now exposed to everyone who wasn't there too.
Yes.
So
Okay, so next question. What are the biggest things that make people, especially young people, feel like they don't belong in their community?
I think some of the things was I work with a lot of young people, and I think not being included in conversations or being talked down to, or some make them feel less than. Like you talk about the social media, that would make one not feel included, especially when we start talking about young people and their sexuality. Like they just can't be free, and so many judgments and assumptions are placed on young people today. Back then, it was kept a secret, but now it's so prevalent and known that they just feel dehumanized because of how they feel in a sexual preference now. And so I think the judgment part plays a big role when we talk about young people and not feeling included in the community that they reside in, because they're either going to be bullied, teased, talked about, or shamed, the stigma. So I think that's a huge issue when we talk about the young population not feeling included. But then on the backside is decisions that we make as policymakers. We don't include them in those decisions. We just know because we've either had the proper training, we have the education, that we just know it all. But these young scholars are so intelligent. Like they are like superhumans to me. So we include them in Broadview when we have conversations as it relates to a policy change that impacts them in the community. Because I want young voices to be heard, and I want them to be engaged in civic engagement on what that looks like for a better Broadview versus us, the elected officials that's elected by the public, making all of the decisions. We make decisions based on how we vote, but we don't make decisions on how policy is implemented and executed. And so I think that's the disconnect when you talk about the young population and how they're impacted with decisions we make today for the future.
Wow.
That's really interesting.
So I'm touching upon a little bit about what you said is kind of the judgment that's out there. So Joe, I'll bounce this to you. So as much as there's been kind of progress in definitely sexuality was like very, very exclusive when we were, years ago. Now it's kind of out there. People are a little bit more desensitized. So as much progress as there is, isn't there a net benefit versus, young people being so afraid? Is there a net benefit now that it is so much out there?
Well, there is, and then there's a good upside, but then there's the downside of still dealing with it, right? And then now you have to look at culturally, right? So culturally, our generation, you didn't talk about that stuff. There was a lot of shamefulness in there, and so younger generations out boldly in some of their decisions. Not everybody, but it's countercultural, so it can create this kind of cultural rift inside of families, inside of communities. So there's a way to do this that builds everybody up, but oftentimes we hear like the polarizing sides of the conversation. So that's where people kind of you're almost forced to pick a side, right? When we know that the answer is somewhere in the middle, right? And so having open conversations is great, but the right forums, the right way, the right conversation can bridge that even more so than just being emboldened, right? Like everyone has an opinion. Just because you have an opinion or you have a viewpoint doesn't mean that it's going to connect with somebody else, right? So having kind of being able to share your story, being able to bring somebody into your viewpoint is equally as important to like to bridging that gap, to making it happen faster and better and more fruitfully than just being out there emboldened, right? Having a platform is great. How you use your platform is probably the most important thing for not just the young folks to think about, but for those of us that have been around for a little bit.
Okay, so then now speaking of the generations, Michelle, so how then would, how does it, having the different generations and understanding and the communication piece with that, how does that work together? I mean, does that put more, put more pressure on everyone? How do you navigate that?
Well, and I think in with all the multi-generations and, thinking back of, being in leadership roles, we have 4 generations under one, office. Whatever your team structure, there's 4 generations in the workforce, right? And so, and I being somewhere in the middle of all the generations. So I've had generations older than me on my team, generations younger. And I think a lot of it comes down to the empathy piece and awareness and understanding where people on your team or your community are coming from and why they're contributing what they're contributing from the lens of where they came from, right? From that generation. And so I think that's a key piece when we're talking about generational stuff is, again, having that emotional awareness, that emotional intelligence, to know that. And then as a leader, I've just found that working with teams and saying, hey, none of us have all the answers, right? But all of us have a little piece of the answers from our perspective, which is awesome, right? So together where you can learn from each other and then put together a greater solution in solving whatever the work project or community initiative or community problem, whatever it is, respecting those different perspectives from the generations and coming together on a solution that fits everyone, I think is awesome.
So can I add to that? Because when we talk about multi-generational in the workplace, leaders have to be inclusive, regardless of what generation that you're in. So for me, it's just making people feel like they are part of. And when we make people feel like they are part of the conversation or the decision making, that's when empathy and compassion shows up. And that's when the real work can happen in workplaces because everybody feel like they have a voice. When we tend to negate from that and look at things of how we were culturally raised or how we were culturally raised up in different workplace environments and we bring it to a new space, then sometimes that could be triggers for some that's in these situations, especially when we're talking about sexuality. So how you make one feel inclusive is, get their ideas on like their culture. Like for me, I talk about Juneteenth and what that means to me culturally. But as I talk to a lot of young people that are mentored, and we're talking about sexuality and what that looks like on a community level, sometimes it's symbolisms that make them feel a part of because they can see it. It may not be verbalized, like raising the pride flag. I mean, that's something to make people feel inclusive, regardless of what generation you're in, because that played through a part of our history. And those are things that we just don't talk about, like in a real transparent conversation, instead of judging assumptions and shaming people. It's really like a conversation, like a cultural or racial type thing, because it's part of who we are as humans. It happened through our history, but we don't talk about certain periods of history and what that really looked like for people to really understand. So I think when we talk about community and different things is, when do compassion show up? And when do empathy show up? And how we use our symbolism to show that this is about humanity, the work that we do every day.
And Julius and I have tons of these conversations. And one of the things we found was just coming to, like, you want compassion, you want empathy. How do you teach that? It's hard to teach that.
It is.
But what's easy to teach is curiosity.
And how you show up.
and how you show up, yes, and curiosity and being genuinely curious. Like Julius is probably one of, if not the most curious person I've ever met in my life, and it makes a big difference, and it helps people have these conversations. Like it helps it to flow, makes it easier, and I think that's one of the things we don't teach in school, and we don't teach like young folks. I had a very wonderful conversation a number of weeks ago with a very impassionate young lady who runs unions and was thinking I was trying to convince her to change what she does and how she does it. I might see things different, but I came to the conversation curious, and it was to the point where she's like, she needed to leave, go run her errand, go do her thing, and she's like, well, hold on, wait, no, I still want to talk to you, even though at first she did not want to talk to me. She thought I was, stranger danger or whatever. I don't know. And so, just I think having that curiosity really helps, and that sounds like the environment you're creating. And so I know we have other questions. I just have a quick question. When you're inviting the young folks in, is it after the rules have been made, or are you asking them for input as you guys are thinking, as a town, you're thinking about how to implement whatever the new law, the new criteria, the new initiative?
So typically when I engage with our young scholars, the first question I ask them is, what do you want to see different in the community? Because I don't know what that looks like. I know what it looks like for policy. Once we get their input then together as a team, so it's a group of 10 kids that I mentored throughout the school year. And so once they all get together, then they negotiate between themselves on what the policy we're going to look at, what we're going to focus on, and how we can execute the plan to make that change. And sometimes it may take the whole 9 months that they're in school, or it may take longer than that depending on what the initiative is. But it's getting them to see the place where you live at. What do you want to see different? And that's the creative part of their brain that's thinking. That's the critical thinking that they need to do, because guess what? They're going to go through these different paths on their journey to get to like where we are today. Like for us, we don't want potholes. I mean, but if they can think outside the box out, bigger than what a pothole is, and like what's real impact in community, that's impactful. And then as they create their generation, what happens is they implement policy that can technically take place. They see that actually happen, and guess what they do? Even if they leave the community, they always bring their kids back and say, I was a part of that. And that's their legacy. In a community that raised them, they may be out the community, but they could say, oh, I was a part of that. This was when I was in 5th grade or 8th grade or whatever grade they're in. And so that's the real part. It's just really getting them to use their creativity and their compassion for a community and how they execute a plan on that critical thinking. Because we've made it so easy with AI. But they still got to be able to think forward.
And that becomes a source of pride.
Absolutely. And that's all about our mental health and our well-being and how we just navigate to the community. And guess what? Wherever they live, they always have something to say. No, that's not what I learned. I know how to create a policy. I know how to ask the question. I know right from wrong. And I know how to be engaged in a community that I live in, where I pay taxes and I know what I want. So I know how to make the demand.
Wow, that's excellent. Wow. Okay, moving right along. Can you think of a time when someone helped you in a kind or understanding way and it changed how you lead today?
Oh man, I got stories. I actually been doing like this thing like dictation.
Yeah.
Like trying to just recall like back from a childhood to where I am now. So.
You writing a book?
Okay. Take me slow. So when I was 8 years old, we lived in an apartment. And right next to this apartment was a nursing home. And a friend of mine, we still friends to this day, we used to go and read to the elderly. And so as I started going on my journey from 8 years old to middle school to high school, just things just started happening, but I never put it into perspective, that moment that I spent with the elderly, until I became an adult. Because that's where my passion is. It's making sure those that don't have the resources or need a little bit of extra care or love, or they don't have loved ones to talk to or come see about them. So that's where I found my niche. As a young person, growing up in the community, I grew up in Inglewood, California, and it was some hard times. Single family, single mom. And when I got 16, I ran track and cross country, but I had the opportunity to go to China to run cross country. And when I say it was life changing, it changed my whole life. It changed my whole life because it's not just reading about it in a book, it's actually living it. And that's why I tell, the young people, if you get an opportunity to travel as much as you can, even if it's just going downtown to Chicago to see it's a beautiful city. A lot of opportunities there where you can see bigger than where you are.
Right.
And then from that, you branch out. So we started, Mayor Harvey, Bellwood, Mayor Booker, Maywood, and myself, we started taking young people to our conferences with us. And it's a lot of times these kids have never been on an airplane. So let alone being in a hotel. And so just giving them that opportunity, it really makes my heart happy because that happened for me. And I'm actually like paying it forward to see young people being able to travel, because once they have that one opportunity, they never look back. I never look back. Yes, and that's what the work is really about, is just leading on a pathway to give them hope. Because sometimes, depending on the family structure, the hope can seem hopeless. And that impacts your mental health on how we think, how we carry all of this weight. And kids carry a lot of weight that adults just have no clue of the weight that they carrying, because if you're a single mom and you just trying to pay the rent and put food on the table, make sure I have clothes to go to school, and the kid don't want to ask for nothing because they know how hard mom is working. But they may need something and they don't know how to ask, because they see or they hear conversations of the struggles that mom is going through. I got to pay this bill. I got to do this. The rent is due. I don't have enough for this. I can't do that. I don't know if you're going to be able to do that. I don't know where I'm going to get the money from. So the kids carry that heavy load as they try to go through their educational experience. And we as adults don't think about the children until it's almost too late. And so, in Erickson Institute, I'm a fellow there, and the one question that always stick with me is, how are the children today? Because they carry a lot.
So the flip side of that is, how do you both acknowledge how much young people are carrying, but not so much that their entire vantage point is from a victim?
So for me, I just meet them where they are. Because when we meet them where they are, because sometimes they close in. They don't want to share. And, that happens to a lot of adults. That's why a lot of adults don't go get professional counseling or the services that's available through like the EPA programs that the workplace offer. And so they shut down, they shut in. And it's like anything else. It's like building a relationship with you. Like, how much am I going to trust you with this information? They function the same way. Because a lot of kids don't trust because of situational things. But it's meeting them where they are and building that trust. The kids that I work with, I could just see the growth over this 9 months talking to the parents too. The parents see it. Like, this kid didn't talk, and they really didn't. But now you see it, the smiles on the face, they talking, they engaging. You can see it, but it takes time. It don't happen overnight. It's just how we move the needle just a little bit. We just need to move it a little bit to see that little bit of growth. And when we start seeing the growth in the right areas, especially as it relates to youth mental health, and even our own mental health, because believe it or not, I tell them, just like y'all think I'm curing your mental health needs, y'all actually are a cure for me too. So it works two ways, but that's bringing them to the table and having these conversations.
I think one thing is really clever. Both nonprofits that are producing the Let's Grow Together Festival.
Mm-hmm.
Your Passion First, one thing that happened early on, I sit on the board there, they created projects where it was the young adults here in Chicago, but then they also branched out to Brazil and South Africa, so the kids could be able to redefine what struggling actually is, right? Not that they're not struggling here, but when it would be so interesting. We'd be on a video call, this is during the pandemic, and all of a sudden, someone couldn't get on the call because they their internet just went out in the entire town, right? And that was like a normal thing. And kids from here would be like, "What? Are you crazy? Oh my God, I can't believe that!" But they were throughout the entire kind of session, they worked on a project together, and so they had to, kind of work with that. And then for what was really great about a Greater Good Foundation, it was they took their young people to Columbia.
Oh,
right?
nice.
And so young people got a chance to go to Columbia, and it was just so interesting to hear them talk about, from the excitement and the fear from them getting ready to leave, all the way to getting on the plane, and then being there with people who kind of look like them but don't speak the same language, right? So that just thinking about that travel aspect is so important, and these kids will remember this for the rest of their lives, for sure.
I'm a witness.
Yeah, and so it's a good perspective point too, right? It just adds that layer of perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was 18, 19, when I was a kid, actually, we would come out to the city and we go visit our family on the west side. And then when we were leaving, I remember as a little kid, I'd sit in the back of the window and I'd be staring at the buildings. And one day I asked my mom, I was like, "Mom, why are we going this way when it seems like everything?" So by the time I was 19 years old, I was and I realized that years later, with the city. So I'm a person who I like to create and produce things, and often have some idea, and I have to get everybody to come with me, and then find out later. But I say this because what the city meant. I think about all the buildings that are there, and I think about the committees that, and all of the people who are lined up saying that no, a skyscraper is not possible. Like there's no way, and give lists and lists of reasons why this person's crazy, and get them out of here. And here you look at the city with all these skyscrapers.
Yes.
So it represents possibility to me.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So moving right along, thinking about leadership in action. So when someone in the town is feeling low or overwhelmed, and we talked a little bit about this, what do you hope they feel when they think about asking for help from you or other leaders in the community?
So what I would hope is that they don't feel like I'm going to judge the situation, and that they know however help that I can provide with assistance that is coming from love and kindness. And so everything, like even from our newsletters, every week I sign off love and kindness, because words resonate with people. Once they see the love and kindness is followed up by the action. And so once they know that that's happening, that means that they trust me enough that they can ask me whatever question that they want. I'm not going to judge, and it's going to come from a place of love and kindness, but I'm going to be upfront with the answer. Now, they may not like the answer, but that's the human aspect of we all got our own ways of thinking, and I'm okay with that. But I think as long as I continue the path of what love and kindness look like and the action behind that, that's when true transformation and communities start transforming. It's because they seeing leaders show up and being vulnerable, because we have to be vulnerable too. Like I share personal stories with residents that's having hardships, whether it's mortgage payments. I've had my own issues with mortgage payment too. Water bill payment. I've had high water bill before, so I'm able to articulate that. Pulling permits from the village. I've had issues with pulling a permit to build a fence in my backyard. So I've had lived experience that's relatable to people. And when we can relate to the people like in our vulnerable space and being upfront and transparent, they respect that. But they know that it's a trusted source that's coming back to say, "Oh, well, if she the mayor and she been through this, what? Let me see what she got to say." Because it's sharing stories. And like I think you said earlier, it's like how we show up and how we share our stories. Storytelling is a real thing, and it resonates with people, especially if it's their lived experience.
Michelle, do you have any memories of a time when you were, you felt like you really needed to talk to someone and didn't really want to talk to someone about it, and then, but then they came to you actually and made you feel very comfortable about it?
Yeah, all the time as a kid. There's that, like, yeah, like you said, like kids just kind of go inward and, they think they're being discreet and hiding it and keeping it to themselves. And then, you get to go on that car ride and it's like, what's up? It's that, isn't that the parent tactic is you take your kid on in the car and they're kind of isolated. That's
What's
when you could
wrong
have
with you?
what's up, right? Or, when all of a sudden you're alone. So when you get the questions, right? And it's like, okay, they noticed and, it's a safe space. It's not like on display, so you're not going to feel that shame. You always feel a certain level, I think, too, when vulnerability's at play is that the element of like, oh, I might feel that shame in that situation. But, and then you're like, okay, it's safe, And so I think for me, I can't think of, in my memories of it, it would be like, I know there's like a bunch of situations, but it was always sort of that consistent, okay, as soon as there's that alone time, I'm going to get called out,
Yeah. Joe, so how about you? You have a Jacob's 11? How do you know? How do you know when, there's something going on and he doesn't want to say anything?
Oh, he's like super obvious. Like he's quiet. He's shut down. And because of the medical traumas he's had as a kid with surgeries and other stuff, he'll go super overboard. Like he'll drop something, make a mess, and he doesn't do it so much anymore at 11, but like at 7 years old, right? He would mess something up, and he'd immediately punish himself. It's like, all right, what went wrong? And now as a parent, we're not even trying to be like, all right, you're in trouble. It's like, all right, now we have to kind of de-escalate the situation. So, excuse me, I've had a totally different way to parent where it's like, I have a kid who's already super hyper focused on what he's done wrong and trying to help him power through that. Right. And so that's where it's been a little different, right?
How do you send a message to him to let him know that it's okay? Is it something that you just wait till something happens, or is it like a concerted effort that you're constantly like putting out there here and there to let them know before?
Well, it depends on one, is it okay, right? If it's okay, then I try to express right away, like, dude, it happens. Like, you drop the glass and the lemonade spill. Like, it's cool. We can come clean it up. Like, do you want to help me clean it up, or are you just you're too embarrassed? You don't want to clean it up. Like, what is it? Or is he just being lazy, right? Like kids, right? Like, tactic. I made a mess, so I'll just go hide, right? So it just depends, right? It depends on, if he did something wrong, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to let him know you can't do that. Like, that is not, it's not right. Now, you've punished yourself to a level that maybe is I have no punishment for you because you punished yourself more than I did. I would.
Yeah.
Right. But there's other times, there's other things as he's getting older, things are getting a little more serious. So, we'll have to be like, dude, the Nintendo Switch disappeared. Like, you can go on a scavenger hunt to try to find it.
Yeah. Okay, so coming to a close, and just kind of bridging it into everyday life, what do you think? Why do you think it's hard for communities and institutions to see emotional wellness as a leadership priority? And what's one way you can or have changed that?
So I think when we talk about the workplace and what that look like for employees, is the leader has to be able to identify your staff. And once you identify, you kind of know the behavior patterns, you know what the triggers are, but you have to be in a stable place to even be able to identify. So for us in the village of Broadview, we participated in the Dare to Lead Dr. Brandon Brown program. And so we went through the whole segment with that and what that looked like and what showing up looks like, how we interact with our staff at every level, and how we get them engaged to participate. Like, you're going to always have those people that's in the stands that's going to send triggers. but how you show up in the arena is really what is important, and how you navigate through all of those different behaviors. And like for me, I have a department head of 6 in my administration. It's 6. So just think I'm dealing with just 6 personalities just at that level. And then when you start going down to then you start dealing with all these multiple on top of customer service, dealing with the public and all of the personalities that come with that. So I have to have sanity. And so you talked about peace, and I just love that so much because that's how I show up every day in peace. Like anyone that walk into my office, the first thing they have to do is ask, is this a good time for you? Ask for my permission, because you know what? I come with my own baggage. I have my family, aging parents, a daughter, stuff, family stuff. Ask me, is this a good time? Because you don't know if I just got off the phone dealing with an issue from my own family. So I want to make sure that I show up in a safe space to be able to hear you and be able to listen. Because if I'm not there, then I may say something that will trigger you, and then you mad at me for the rest of the day, and I'm just dealing with my own stuff, not worried about what's going on in Michelle's world today. So it's just, I think leadership is how you show up every day for the teams that you lead. And once they see that in you, they kind of mimic that because they know what the expectation is as it relates to how we vulnerable, how we show up to work, and how we show up for our teams. Because I have fire and police very critical, even public works, depending on the work that they're doing. That could be a life or death type of situation. So I want to make sure that we all are in a good space where we know how to navigate through if something should show up for us throughout the day, because no 2 days are the same. It's just all in how you show up. And I show up with love and kindness every day.
And I think it's great that you mentioned you went through the Brene Brown, because she studies shame.
Yes.
And we talked about that throughout, is shame, and that really is the root of a lot of people's behaviors, and then we could stem into other areas of being, identifying, like you said, the behaviors of everyone, right? And that's where that shame just transmutes and it shows up in different ways, but having that emotional intelligence and working with your teams to say, hey, giving not just yourself, I think it's great, you as the leader going through the training, but then having your leadership go through the training so that they're able to identify those things in their teams as well. So you have that from the top down, and it's everyone, not just top leadership or not just staff. It's top down, so everyone's operating at that same level of awareness. And again, like you said, that understanding the situation is now a good time.
Yeah, so like walking through the hall, depending on what's going on, you hear like some of the leaders say, I'm just daring to lead today. I'm daring to lead, because it can get that, like, you're dealing with the public and they will test you, like, to the T. And then you hear them say, I'm just daring to lead today. So I know that they're using the tools that has been given to them as a resource on how you deal with a difficult situation or how we interact with the public, because we don't want to be offensive, because this is a place of service. But sometimes people will push you there, like you just really want to get real belligerent with them.
Your face down moment.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I got to show up for the public. How am I going to do it? Right?
Exactly.
In Brene Brown, terms.
Exactly.
I read all her books. Yeah, I love her.
And you walk into a room where you have polarizing opinions, and
Yes.
you have to serve both,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's very difficult
Yeah,
situation.
you learn to become a good listener. Very few words, no judgment.
No judgment.
And then you have to take care of yourself, right?
Oh, I do.
Yeah, so we got the wonderful story of, so election day was April 1st.
Mm-hmm.
What did you have scheduled for April 2nd, regardless of the outcome of the election?
Oh, my flight was at 6 a.m. I would never do that again, though, because we had the election night watch party. I almost missed my flight.
Where were you going?
I went to Mexico. I went to a healing retreat spa. And so it was 10 days. And, I encourage everyone to, take time for yourself. And I'm real big on that. Sunday, I was at Target stores, and one of the residents was asking me about a water bill. So I'm listening, and I really wanted to help them, But my only response is, I don't have enough information to give you the right answer. I said, but I'm here shopping. I'm off today. And his response was, but you're the mayor 24 hours. I said, I am, but you don't have an emergency right now. So have a good day, sir. And I kept walking because I have to take care of me first. And I can't, engage with those that want to be combative because they want something like instant right now. And that's the environment that we live in, is instant gratification. When it's my time, it's my time, and I respect that to no end. I do whatever I want on Sundays. I entertain like community events on Saturday. That's when you said the 8th was what you all was. I was like, okay, I'm gonna pull this off. Because I really just want to stay in tune to like what's healthy for me, what's healthy for my well-being. I spend a lot of time serving the community, and I don't take enough time for me and my mental health and my well-being as it relates to how I want to show up for people. And I want to show up for my team. I want to show up for the community and all that's impacted, of the work that I do every day.
Well, I think the key to that too is you've acknowledged you need rest. We all need rest, right?
Yes.
And so you have to rest, recharge your battery. So, and being intentional about it, and I can't stress that enough, is like being intentional about like we need to rest. You can't just burn the candle at both ends, but making that space for yourself to have that time. And so you did that by scheduling that, even though you're probably, one eye open, like going to the airport to get on your flight after the election day, but knowing that, okay, this now is going to be my time to recharge.
Yes.
And knowing that ahead of time and being intentional about scheduling that time, which I think is so important.
And I still feel good.
Yeah.
Even if I'm running late to meetings, I'll call and say, my schedule is running behind. I'm okay with that. Or if we have to reschedule, I'm okay with that. I just, I have to live as I'm aging.
We all are.
Yeah, but I just see it as, sometimes I heard you say, at one point you was working 70 hours a week.
That was a light week.
And a light week. But just think how many early in our careers, how we just did whatever it takes. Yeah. This is not the culture today.
Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother podcast right there.
Yeah, but this is not the culture today. Even like looking at the generations behind us, they are real intentional about. I mean, I think we was having a conversation about going to a 4-day weekday. And so I was like, okay, I used to work a 4-day week when I worked 10 hours a day and got 3 days off. I said, so what's the difference?
Yeah, they want to work 6 hours a day.
And get paid for the whole week.
4 days a week and get,
But these are real conversations that show up on like what the expectations would be for the workforce. And then as you tie in technology, like the AI that can free up a lot of things that we do, like I still write my own memos. But now AI is playing a factor just to free up that type of time. Mm-hmm. And so looking at the dynamics of what the future really looked like for us that worked 70 plus hours just to survive in the workplace. Because if you didn't, they didn't think you could carry the weight. Mm-hmm. So it's what you had to do. Am I right, Michelle?
Yep, I did it.
So, it's just how the shift is shifting and how we shift with that momentum of how we're working with younger generations in the workplace and being able to identify and cultivate those relationships so that we can continue to serve at a high level of excellency and not lose none of the momentum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said.
That's the
key,
the real trick.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love this time we're living in with AI.
Yes.
We can solve that now. We have technology that can help with the execution piece, but with the added time, if we're intentional about creating relationship and bridging those gaps and getting people to, what do you do with those extra hours?
You rest, you take care of yourself, you take care of your family, you're able to do more of the things that requires human interaction.
Exactly.
And we are creatures of habit, and we're creatures that we have to have this interaction with each other. Mm-hmm. And COVID showed us that we don't do well when we're not communicating.
Yeah, we're relational beings.
We are.
By nature.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what we lost that in the information age.
Yep.
Because a lot of us, myself included, got behind the computer terminal and what can I crank out through this magic box that just makes, you know, stuff appear on the piece of paper or on the screen, right? And we lost that humanness, we lost that interaction, we lost the meaningfulness to all the work.
Yes, I
But the
agree.
young people are in tune with it. And that's kind of the scary thing, is like you have a generation that's in tune to self-care and meaningfulness, right?
Yes.
And whatever, you know, young people's meaningfulness is about meaningfulness, and they want to be connected to that. And so as older generations, are we gonna allow the use of the technology to create the space to engage that way, or are we going to use the technology to try to chain more people to the desk,
Right.
and now you should be able to produce 100 times more because you have the computing power of AI.
Yeah.
Interesting. Last thoughts, Michelle. You brought up a great point.
For another podcast.
Yeah, no, but it's all connected. It's all connected.
It is.
You talked a little bit about the different generations that bridges right into AI. We're relational beings. So what do you see for is the future? Are they chaining everybody, or is it opening space for spending more time doing things that you want to do?
Yeah, well, I think, and Joe kind of drew it all out, as well as Mayor Katrina on, like, we're evolutionarily moving forward, right? And so how do we leverage technology that does help speed things up, but also opens up time so we can be more intentional about the things that we need as human beings, like having that human interaction connectivity and or being more present in situations where it does require that human intervention piece, right? That technology will never do,
Well, the last wave we had, so we're in a library, a beautiful library, right? It's not a big library, but it's a gorgeous library. And this is like it's dying technology. But when we were growing up, that's if you needed to do research,
We went to the library.
you went to the library. But then, AOL came in, and more and more and more, we just went to the internet, and we could do the research faster and get more resources, and it made the need of a library less and less and less. But the importance of a library has never gone away.
The resources.
The
It's a
resources,
resource,
the
yep.
connection,
Yep.
the people, the interactions, right? And so,
It's a destination.
It is.
and it's a forgotten resource, it's a forgotten art, and that's my hope with AI, is that we start to remember the resources that make us who we are, and where we are in the the history of the world. Let's not forget, we used to sit by, it was very commonplace to sit around a fire and talk about stories and share in our days, and we don't do that anymore because we can grab a device and
Now we're
FaceTime.
sitting by a camera.
You can FaceTime.
Now we're sitting by a camera having a conversation, telling stories. Yeah.
Last thoughts, Mayor.
Well, I think this was a really good conversation, something that I'm deeply passionate about, especially the emotional intelligence part, because I think as adults that have not tapped into that is lost, or they don't know how to find their way to that by not engaging or talking to like a mental health professional that can put some best practices in place to tap into that emotional side of it. Because at least from my perspective, at some point we've all dealt with childhood trauma, and all of that trauma and baggage have followed us through adolescence, through adulthood, to young adults, to our 30s, 40s, 50s, and it just carry on. And then it's just like a recycle of when do that generation gap breaks and sever when we start talking about the capacity of how we emotionally show up for people. So I like that the conversation was about emotional awareness, because I think that's so key, and that's why I put my whole team through the Dare to Lead program.
Yeah.
Because that's a part that's missing in a lot of professions. Even talking to our police chief, he was saying like all of the training that he's ever received through his professional career, he's never been through a training like that. It's how we show up for people and give them an opportunity or another resource or a tool to put in a toolkit that they can go through to help them be better for themselves, number one, themselves, their family, their children, the workplace, and however it shows up for them. But at least they got something to say, is empathy showing up today? Or do I need to be compassionate? Did I just say something that was shameful to you? How I retract that and show up, or how do I show up as a vulnerable person to say this is my story too? So.
Well, yeah, I think I'll end with kind of what I got out of today was a lot of kind of the self-awareness, the self-care, and I think, and the curiosity I think is really important. And I guess leaving with the idea of shared experiences to help activate those who are less likely to be proactive about sharing what's happening for them, right? So I think I always try to think about those who are kind of on the fringes, that have so much inside of them but just don't know how, or they just don't know, or they need, it's like almost like a starter. They got to get started up, you know what I'm saying, before they start sharing. And I think those shared experiences are that natural bridge to something that may be, not happening well with you, or something that may be amazing with you, right? And then once that starts happening, then everyone starts to become more open to now taking in some of this other training and information about, like, oh, I'm sorry, like walking in and say, is this a good time for you, right? Whereas other times someone may say, like, well, I don't like her because everything's got to be revolved around her, and it's just like, well, you're walking into someone's space, right?
Exactly.
So it's just courteous.
That's the boundaries.
Right. but they may not be able to get there yet. So I feel like these shared experiences allow folks to get curious, to be open to other people, and then now, okay, what is it that you would like me to learn out of this, right? So this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much. This has been another episode of the Workplace Theater podcast with our special guests, Mayor Katrina Thompson and Michelle and Joe. And until soon, thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for having me. Good conversation.
Absolutely. It was amazing.